come into this circle of community, come into this sacred space. Be not tentative, bring your whole self. Bring the joy that makes your heart sing. Bring your kindness and your compassion. Bring also your sorrow, your pain. Bring your brokenness and your disappointments. Spirit of love and mystery, help us to recognize the spark of the divine that resides within each of us. May we know the joy of wholeness. May we know the joy of being together. And now at this time, we'll have an opportunity to light our candles of community. You can light a candle for a joy or a concern, or simply to bring more light into our space.
Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part I seek. Let me be part of the love. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part I seek. Let me be part of the love. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part I seek. Let me be part of the love you give.
Let us stand together in body or spirit for the lighting of the chalice and our spoken affirmation. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that visions a world flourishing with equality for all its people, a faith that demands the living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of wholeness. This tiny flame is the symbol of the spark of all that is within each of us. Let us join together in the spoken affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom, and to help one another. You may be seated. Our opening thought comes from Byung-Chul Han from Müdigkeitsgesellschaft. In social networks, the function of friends is primarily to heighten narcissism by granting attention as consumers to the ego exhibited as a commodity.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Our next reading comes from David Levithan from his work, Two Boys Kissing. This is what you do now to give your day topography. Scan the boxes, read the news, see the chain of your friends reporting about themselves. Take the 140-character expository bursts and sift through for the information you need. It's a highly deceptive world, one that constantly asks you to comment, but doesn't really care what you have to say. The illusion of participation can sometimes lead to participation, but more often than not, it only leads to more illusion, dressed in the guise of reality. Let's hear these words from Rebecca Parker in a spirit of meditation. In the midst of a world marked by tragedy and beauty, there must be those who bear witness against unnecessary destruction, and who, with faith, rise and lead in freedom, with grace and power. There must be those who speak honestly and who do not avoid seeing what must be seen of sorrow and outrage, of tenderness and wonder. There must be those whose grief troubles the water, while their voices sing and speak refreshed worlds. There must be those whose exuberance rises with lovely energy that articulates earth's joys. There must be those who are restless for respectful and loving companionship among human beings, whose presence invites people to be themselves without fear. There must be those who gather with the congregation of remembrance and compassion, draw water from old wells, and walk the simple path of love for neighbor. And there must be communities of people who seek to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God, who call on the strength of soul force to heal, transform, and bless life. There must be religious witness. Our next reading is from Anne Applebaum from her work, Twilight of Democracy, The Seductive Lure of Authoritarianism. She writes, "The issue is not merely one of false stories, incorrect facts, or even election campaigns and spin doctors. The social media algorithms themselves encourage false perceptions of the world. People click on the news they want to hear. Facebook, YouTube, and Google then show them more of whatever it is that they already favor, whether it is a certain brand of soap or a particular form of politics. The algorithms radicalize those who use them too. If you click on perfectly legitimate material on YouTube sites, for example, these can lead you quickly in just a few more clicks to white nationalist sites and then to violent xenophobic sites because they have been designed to keep you online. The algorithms also favor emotions, especially anger and fear. And because the sites are addictive, they affect people in ways they don't expect. Anger becomes a habit. Divisiveness becomes normal. Even if social media is not yet the primary news source for all Americans, it already helps shape how politicians and journalists interpret the world and portray it. Polarization has moved from the online world into reality."
YouTube, Twitter, Facebook too. I feel I'm getting closer to you. We used to be strangers, but now that's not true. Because I read and hear all about you. It does not matter if you don't reply. I know we're friends now, that's no lie. You always say good morning, hello and bye. I know where you go, how you feel and why. Do-do-do, do-do-do-do. Google plus Flickr, Spotify, so many out there for you to try. Put your life on the web and you will find like-minded people all have a good time. And ever since you entered my life, I don't feel alone anymore. So go on and YouTube, Twitter, Facebook me. That's the way to get closer, you see. We used to be strangers, but now that won't be. If you subscribe and get back to me.
Of course, there's a song called the Social Media Song. I think it's critical that we are intentional about developing the social ethics of social media. The chaos at a certain social media site over the last number of months, the chaos at Twitter, highlights the importance of asking the question, what is the social good of social media? With billions of persons investing so much of their time and lives into their presence on social media and getting so much of their information and news from social media, how can it be used in ways that benefit rather than harm the well-being of the human community? There are aspects of social media that seem to bring out the worst in us. Or perhaps in some cases, the worst in us has been looking for a way to express itself, and social media has provided the opportunity that the worst in us has been searching for. It is not that most of us are doing anything illegal on social media, though some people are doing illegal things on social media, but just because something is legal does not mean that it is moral. And this also applies to our actions and speech on social media. As is the case with so many of our incredible technological advances, the technology of social media seems to have advanced more quickly than our moral and spiritual capabilities to use it in responsible ways for good of all persons, and for the well-being of all life. There is a tendency in the social, physical distance that we experience on social media to create a context in which we are less civil and simply more mean to one another. Perhaps we should attempt to apply what I call the face-to-face rule in our social media interactions with each other. If we would not say something to other persons or about them if we were in the same room with them, we usually ought not to say it on social media. As with everything, though, there are exceptions to this rule, and there are times when power differentials, safety, and privacy make social media one of the only places where some things can be said that must be said. But for the most part, the face-to-face principle is a helpful guide for our social media interaction. I often think of my social media sites, my profiles, as something like my digital home or my digital living room. And I'm happy to have guests, even guests with opposing views. But if you begin to mistreat me or other guests in my digital living room, I will not hesitate to show you the digital door. As is the case in our lives outside of social media, our goals for speech and action should always be to do no harm and to do actual good. This does not mean that we are not to speak difficult truths to power and to each other, but we ought to do so in ways that will create beloved community rather than cultivate continued chaos. On social media and in the rest of our lives, it is good and right to speak and act in truth for love and justice. But as problematic as some of our personal interactions may be on social media, when we look at the social ethics of social media, the practices and behaviors of corporate social media companies and the economic and political powers behind those practices and behaviors are of exponentially greater moral and social consequence. These powers have used our desire for self-expression and social participation against us, for the acquisition, maintenance, and expansion of their own economic and political power. The very worst expressions of this have come from a global network of autocrats who have used social media to spread misinformation and disinformation, to manipulate people to become more nationalistic, more xenophobic, and less democratic. Autocrats like Vladimir Putin have managed to do much more damage to the well-being and stability of democratic societies through a relatively small investment in social media than the Soviet Union ever managed to do through massive military expenditures. And of course, we have all seen what damage an autocrat with a tweeting machine can do within our own country. The increase in autocratic nationalism in Europe, the United States, India, Turkey, Brazil, Italy, and many other countries and places has been strengthened by the systematic spread of propaganda, disinformation, and conspiracy theories promulgated through social media. And now with Twitter, one of the largest social media platforms in the world, being taken over by Elon Musk, a self-proclaimed free speech absolutist who himself has used Twitter to spread misinformation and disinformation about the pandemic and other important social and political issues, and who has recently re-platformed numerous neo-Nazis and white supremacists. With all of this, we are experiencing a particularly dangerous phase in social media's evolution. What Mr. Musk either does not understand or chooses not to understand is that respecting freedom of speech within a democratic society does not mean that a social media company cannot or should not put certain restrictions on harmful, hateful, and violent speech on their platform. And when a social media platform allows and even encourages the spread of disinformation and of hate speech, one appropriate response would be to boycott that social media platform. This is especially the case when the social media company is making its profits from advertisements that bring in more revenue when more persons are participating on the social media site in question. If enough advertisers and users boycott Twitter to the point where it is no longer profitable to provide a platform to disseminate hate and disinformation, then perhaps some reform or change will be possible. This does not rule out the possibility of some government oversight and regulation when it comes to issues of health and safety. But of course, Twitter is not the only morally problematic social media platform. Facebook uses our activity on their site to make money through advertising and uses algorithms for controlling our experience such that we see only those perspectives and news that we tend to agree with. And these algorithms also use outrage as a driving emotion to hook us, to make more clicks and create more interaction with the platform, which in turn brings in more advertising dollars. Then there's TikTok, favorite of my daughter's generation. For those of you who love TikTok, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to lay it out on TikTok too. TikTok is essentially controlled and monitored by the Chinese government. It's true. When it was confirmed through irrefutable evidence that TikTok was using IP addresses it collected to monitor journalists, this we know for sure, this is an irrefutable fact. When that became definite and certain, that ended my brief use of the app. Even though it's difficult for me now to see some things that are sent to me on text message from my daughters that are on TikTok, I just could not continue to use an app that was using the information of journalists to track their movements in the world. And don't get me started on social media sites like Parler and Truth Social, both of which were created so that those who were breaking the relatively loose rules of Facebook and Twitter could spread disinformation and hate elsewhere with no consequences. Ultimately, the moral failures we see, experience, and which we sadly sometimes contribute to in the social media universe are the same moral failures we're experiencing within society as a whole. Over and over again, we see evidence that these moral failures and the systems which perpetuate and exacerbate these moral failures are addressed most adequately by societies that are the most fully democratic. Societies in which people have the greatest access to full participation in political processes. In societies, it is much less likely that autocrats and narcissistic billionaires, when you have democratic societies, full and vibrant democratic societies, it is much less likely that autocrats and narcissistic billionaires will come to have so much economic and political power that they will be able to acquire as much control and power over the social media landscape as they currently possess. In the end, perhaps our social media problem is primarily a problem with the weakness and the corruption of our democracy. A weakness and corruption that allows for the concentration of economic and political power in the hands of the few, who then exert control over not only what happens on social media, but who also perpetuate systems of injustice and inequality in society as a whole, that they then use for continued personal gain, most often to the detriment of a just and participatory beloved community. If we want more ethics in our social media, it requires more justice in our society. And more justice in our society requires a more vibrant democracy. And looking at the current state of our democracy, it looks like we all have some work to do. At this time, those who wish may bring their gifts to the table. There's also an opportunity to give online.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Stand together in body or spirit for our parting thought and the extinguishing of the chalice. Our parting thought comes from Todd Perimulter. What matters most? What matters the most is how good a person is, not how good their follower count is. So the best thing you can do is to nourish your own inner kindness and compassion. Let us join together in the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.